Edward Fitzgerald Ned Beale was a military officer, frontiersman, and explorer who is best known for having blazed Beale's Wagon Road in the late 1850s. Born in Washington, D.C. on February 4, 1822, Edward Beale was the son of George and Emily Beale. Raised in a naval family, he attended Georgetown University before joining the Naval School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. During his naval career, he served on various ships voyaging to Russia, Brazil, and the West Indies. Following his graduation from the Naval School as a midshipman in 1842, he spent 2 years sailing in Europe and South America. When Commodore Robert Stockton elevated him to acting sailing master, he traveled to California in the frigate Congress. However, after about 3 weeks, he was summoned back to Washington, D.C., carrying several vital dispatches. Upon arriving in Washington in March 1846, he was promoted to the rank of master and promptly set sail for Panama. The vessel arrived in California on July 20, 1846. Amidst the Mexican-American War, Commodore Stockton deployed Beale to serve with the land forces. Before the Battle of San Pasqual on December 6, 1846, Beale and other soldiers under Lieutenant Archibald Gillespie soon joined General Stephen W. Kearny's column. When the Mexican army encircled the small American force, posing a serious threat, Beale, accompanied by his Delaware Indian servant and frontiersman Kit Carson, stealthily navigated through the Mexican lines. Their objective was to reach San Diego and secure reinforcements. Their courageous actions played a pivotal role in saving Kearny's soldiers. Over the subsequent 2 years, Beale embarked on 6 additional journeys across the country. During his second expedition in the summer of 1848, he traversed Mexico incognito to provide the federal government with evidence of California's gold reserves. On one of his return trips to the east, he married Mary, the daughter of Pennsylvania Representative Samuel Edwards, on June 27, 1849. Together, they eventually had 3 children. In 1850, Beale was promoted to lieutenant but resigned from the Navy the following year. He then returned to California and initially worked for W. H. Aspinwall and Commodore Stockton, who held extensive properties in the region. He took up the position of Superintendent of Indian Affairs for California and Nevada 2 years later. After his assignment in Washington, D.C., he returned overland to California with a group of 13 men, inspecting a route for the first transcontinental railroad that would pass through Colorado and Utah and end in Los Angeles, California. At Beale's suggestion, Fort Tejon was founded in California in 1854 with the aim of safeguarding and managing the Indians residing on the Sebastian Indian Reservation. The fort also served to shield both indigenous peoples and white settlers from attacks by the Paiute, Mojave, Chemehuevi, and other tribes from the desert areas to the east. Up until 1856, when he was promoted to the rank of Brigadier General in the California State Militia, Beale served as the Superintendent of Indian Affairs. This status gave him additional negotiating leverage with Native American tribes to reach peace agreements. President James Buchanan gave Beale the assignment in 1857 to survey and build a wagon road that would run 1,000 miles from Fort Defiance, Arizona, to the Colorado River, which marks the border between Arizona and California. During this period, the U.S. Army conducted a trial using camels in the desert. With the southwest region rapidly expanding, it was believed that camels could transport double the load of horses or mules and could potentially be utilized for tracking and pursuing Native Americans, as they could endure longer periods without water or rest. Prior to Beale's survey expedition, the initial camels arrived from Africa in early 1857. Lieutenant Edward Beale, 35, was chosen to command the 1st U.S. Army Camel Corps after the Secretary of War approved its formation in March. Beale enlisted 25 camels for his initial survey expedition, loading them up with supplies. At first, the soldiers despised the camels for their unruly behavior, a sentiment Beale initially shared. However, as time passed, he came to appreciate their capabilities, and by the time the expedition reached California, Beale recognized the value of the camels. He employed them again in a subsequent expedition from 1858 to 1859, which extended the road from Fort Smith, Arkansas. Nevertheless, the presence of camels frightened the horses and mules, and most soldiers were unwilling to learn how to ride them. Soon, critics argued that the Camel Corps was a misuse of funds. Eventually, the Army decided to discontinue the camel experiment. and the herd was either sold at auction or set free in the desert. In the meantime, Beale successfully completed what became known as the Beale Wagon Road, a popular route for immigrants during the 1860s and 1870s. Reflecting on the road, Beale would later comment, "It stands as the swiftest path from our western border, shortening the journey by 300 miles with its nearly straight westward course. The terrain is notably even, requiring our wagons to be pulled by 2 teams only once throughout the entire route, and even then, it's just for a brief climb over a small hill traversing a ground untouched by wheels or trails of any sort before. There's an abundance of water. The longest stretch without water at any point is merely 20 miles. It traverses the expansive desert at its narrowest section." Upon the completion of the Beale Wagon Road, President Abraham Lincoln tapped him to serve as the Surveyor General of California and Nevada in 1861. 3 years down the line, with Fort Tejon no longer in use and abandoned, Beale took the initiative and bought the fort grounds along with extra adjoining land in 1865 and 1866. This transformed the site into what is now known as the Tejon Ranch. Moreover, Beale seized the opportunity to acquire a few camels when the U.S. Army auctioned them off. Later on, Beale relocated his family to Washington, D.C., where he bought the Decatur House for $60,000, situated opposite the White House, in 1871. Undertaking extensive renovations on his property, he and his wife hosted numerous lavish parties, earning a reputation as one of Washington's most renowned hosts. Then, in 1876, President Ulysses S. Grant selected Beale as ambassador to Austria-Hungary, a role in which he showcased his diplomatic skills. Upon retiring, Beale and his wife continued residing at Decatur House but made yearly trips to Tejon Ranch and a horse farm he had founded at Ash Hill in Hyattsville, Maryland, northeast of Washington, D.C. He passed away at Decatur House on April 22, 1893, and was laid to rest at Chester Rural Cemetery in Chester, Pennsylvania. Throughout his life, he maintained friendships with Kit Carson, Buffalo Bill Cody, Ulysses S. Grant, and numerous other prominent figures in American history. Many of the places Beale once journeyed to still stand today. The original segments of the Beale Wagon Road remain visible. Later, the road was followed by the Santa Fe Railroad, Route 66, and Interstate 40. Fort Tejon, which he played a crucial role in establishing, has been renovated and is now a California state park. The Tejon Ranch, located near present-day Bakersfield, California, is currently the largest privately owned property in the United States, covering approximately 270,000 acres. Currently included on the National Register of Historic Places, his Ash Hill horse farm was the scene of parties he threw for friends like Buffalo Bill Cody, President Grover Cleveland, and Ulysses S. Grant. Decatur House also served as the informal gathering spot for the Republican stalwarts, and Ulysses S. Grant was a frequent guest there. In 1956, Beale's daughter-in-law, Marie, left Decatur House to the National Trust.